Taylor Swift was an economy, she would be richer than 50 countries.
Yeah.
Like, that is what?
Welcome to another episode of She's Homemade with myself, Brooke, and joining me, Andrea.
Hi.
Hi. That was cute.
Let me redo that.
Today we're going to be talking about what makes up the ideal businesswoman or a businesswoman, and what we think does anyway. The woman. I think it's like you obviously need to have like that desire to do more, because I mean, I think being a businesswoman, in my opinion, and I mean, people could argue this, but is that entrepreneurial side. Yeah. It's not necessarily, and I mean, if you're a CEO, like in my opinion, that is entrepreneurial because you started that company, 100%. You're doing it. And I think, there's so many things that can make that up. I think a big thing is like having a thick skin. Yeah. And I think the main thing for that is just like when you run a company, you have to be able to run it the way that you want it, and people are going to come in and tell you to do it differently. If you have people to hire, like if they don't work, you have to have the ability to, let them go or move on. And I think being able to like evolve and change is a big one too, because I think like your business went from when you start to even 6 months in to 6 years in to, whatever. It's ever changing. And I think the business world in general is forever changing. It is, yeah. And you have to constantly like evolve and change and be okay with that. And also be okay that, like I said, with your thick skin, that like not everybody's going to follow you there.
Yeah. I think kind of playing off that, I think a really important thing to have is like a very clear vision. Yeah. For yourself and for your business. You have to decide, this is what I want. I'm not going to let it stray. Yeah. But you can be flexible in your vision as well, but you have to stay true to yourself. Yeah. And, when it comes to employees and other people telling you what to do, you have to be very firm on, this is a vision, this is the path that I want. Yeah. I'll take your opinions, I'll take your advice, but ultimately it's what I see for this going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, yeah. I think at the end of the day, like you have to have your vision and you have to be like very stuck to that. And whether that's like a good thing, a bad thing, I don't know. Cause maybe in some cases it can be like a bad trait.
Yeah, true.
Like I'm like that.
Yeah.
And I would say like it bleeds maybe into my home life a little bit, because like I'm also very stubborn, which like, yeah, you know what I mean? And I don't like compromise. Like, right. I like to do things my way. I like to, yeah. And I think like, you have to, even though, and that's why too, like people say like, big CEOs, men or women, that are in like really high roles, they have like those specific attributes, and it's hard sometimes for them to like mesh with their home life. And I do agree with that. Yeah. Cause I think you have to be like really driven and really like, for sure, really stay on your path.
But I also think that like we can attest to this even just with She's Homemade. Like our vision has changed. I think in the beginning, you're feeling it out, you're understanding and kind of forming your path and really deciding where you want it to go and what you want. And in that way, we're quite flexible.
I think so, yeah.
And, we've adapted and we've added things. Yeah. A ton of things in the last 6 months that we didn't even think we were going to. So I think in the beginning, you want to have a really clear vision and definition of where you want it to go, but be willing to add and take away actions and things to get to that vision.
Yeah, and having like a clear vision doesn't necessarily mean being closed-minded, I think. Right. Like you have to have an open mind when you start a business too, because there's so many different things that can pop up. True. And that's what I mean. You have to be adaptable, you have to be open to it. But I don't think necessarily it's like in that sense that you don't have to have like a closed mind and like here's your path and whatever. I think you just have to have like that true drive. Yeah. It's like nothing is going to stop me from doing this. And that's kind of like I think where I'm at in my business too, and I'm sure you are too. Like real estate is so tough right now. Yeah. Like it would be so easy to just like keel over, and like there's a lot of people leaving our industry right now. There will be, there has been, and I think like coming up on this next year, like we're still like struggling to get through it, and like I don't know, you have to like continue. Like I push through it because I'm like, I want to continue to do this. I like my job. Right. I want, like I have so many like goals that passion. Yeah, and just like I'm passionate about it, I have a lot of clear goals that I want to hit. And I'm like, just because I had, you know, a crappy year or a crappy month or the market changed or whatever, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, like this sucks now. I don't want to. It's like, no, I still have my path. I still have my goals. And I'm like, I'm still driven to hit that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So playing off of that and your drive and your ambition, do you think being a woman and, you know, we've talked about like the emotional side of women and like, is being emotional in business a downfall or a plus? Because remember we were reading and I was talking to you about women CEOs and how they've actually proven, there's now studies that say that women-led businesses are more successful.
They have happier staff.
Yeah,
I have seen that. Yeah.
And there was one stat, I wish I had it, but it was talking about how the emotional side of women is actually driving people's, and they've taken over businesses and they've hugely leveled up.
Yeah. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I do too. And I think, you know, maybe a common misconception is that the emotional side of women isn't business oriented, but I think it adds to the business.
I think people take it like way too far too, though.
Yeah.
Like I think people are like, women are too emotional. They cry all the time. And like just because like me being like, I wouldn't call myself like an emotional person in that sense.
Right.
But I would say I'm a type of person that like, I'm very good at like controlling my emotions, not necessarily like so that I don't show them. I don't let them like affect me in a negative way.
Right.
And I think that that's like honestly, I think it's a trait that most women have over men. I think more women have it than men. Like we joke all the time that like, you know, our husbands like are, you know, they get heated quick and they fly off. And it's like, and I think too, it's just like men have that going for them in a lot of stances too. Like they're really driven, they get really, you know what I mean, in a different way though. And for me, I'm like, I'm a very calm, and I think most women are. Yes, we're emotional, but we can also like control that and be very calm and whatever when we need to be, even though sometimes we are in tough situations or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, like we're all human.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I do cry, like I'm gonna relate to somebody. Like that's how I feel. You know?
True. Yeah. I think that emotional intelligence is something that women not only are more aware of in themselves, but also probably try to fix or help themselves be more emotionally intelligent, whereas men probably are either in denial or don't even care to know emotional intelligence.
And I think it maybe just doesn't affect them as much. Like maybe at the end of the day, like they can be a little bit like more like hot-headed and whatever, because I mean people don't really care if men are, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Whereas like if I was like hot-headed and like running around and like I don't know, like if somebody irritated me and I started yelling at people, like women I think just exactly, it would be like it would put a really negative thing on me, whereas I feel like especially like male bosses, like a lot of times like people expect them to be in that way, which sucks for men too. I think like in that sense, like there's a stigma around that, and you know, hopefully for men that aren't that way, they can overcome that, I guess. But for us, I find like I think emotional intelligence is like definitely something that women are better at, in my opinion, than men.
And I think that when it comes to a woman boss or a woman CEO that has those traits of a man being hot-headed or being very stubborn or very business oriented, that comes across as negative for women. Yeah. Which is silly because they're telling women to be like the man CEO. Yeah. Totally. And have these traits as a boss.
And I think too, it's just so easy to be like written off when we're in higher roles too. Yeah. Like, especially if, you know, like, I don't know, I feel like, and I'll agree, like even from a women's standpoint, like I've struggled sometimes to get along with other women. Right. Whereas like sometimes men are easier to get along with because they're more easygoing. They're more, you know, this may be a little off topic, but that's how I feel about it anyway, you know? And I find like as a woman in a business role, I have to be conscious of that because I know that like as a woman, it's easier for me to rub people the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So I think of it that way.
It's funny that you say it like that because like, you know, especially being women and having men clients. Yeah. I just think about things differently now. Yeah. And I was just having a conversation with my friend about like, she was being sexually harassed on an appointment, and she literally had to get up and leave this person's house because she felt so uncomfortable and she didn't know what was going to happen.
Thank God she got out of there though.
And and I think that these are things that women have to deal with all the time.
Yeah.
In sales and in business, and men don't even have that on their radar.
Yeah.
And it's something that we have to come to terms with, and we're constantly navigating through it. And she actually told her dad the story, and he's like, I have never once felt that way going into an appointment. And so now going forward, she has to be like anxious or concerned about going to meet an older male client.
Yeah.
And because she doesn't know what they're going to think.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. But we have to be very careful when we navigate through certain situations.
Totally. And you're very like public, and I don't know, in my opinion, like it doesn't bother men as much to be in like a public role like that, because again, you just don't have like the fears necessarily as much as like women do. And for you, like, well, I've heard of like the horror stories of what real estate agents go through.
Open houses, you get some creeps.
Totally.
And
like I don't deal with it because like I'm not really like client facing in the same way.
Right.
But I do deal with it in the sense that like sometimes, I'll get a DM on like my mortgage page or something, and you're like, is this a client? Like, do I have to entertain this? Like, you know what I mean? And you kind of have to like it's like a touchy subject because you want to be nice, you want to help people, but at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in like a weird position either. Exactly. And it's like, I don't want to entertain this, but then I'm like, now I feel like I have to because they're asking a mortgage question. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic, I think. And I just don't think men even, I think they know that it's happening to us. I do.
I would challenge that. I think they're ignorant to it.
I think some are, but I think there's a lot of men out there that know, like for sure, especially like in the real estate industry and stuff. I think a lot of
true.
Your like colleagues and stuff would say like that
they see it.
They see it for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think like, I think most people like know that it's happening. I just think that it's just not talked about that much.
Yeah.
So.
And it's funny too, and it kind of loops back to what we talked about in an earlier episode of how like being taken seriously as women is hard.
Yeah.
And, there's certain taboos maybe or stigmas around women and how they look. And I think a lot of people think that real estate agents are like flashy or, they try to, look top notch or whatever. And like, that's really
not just in real estate either, though.
Exactly.
It's like in any high role, I feel like, there's so many industries where, if you're, and maybe it does have something to do with success too.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but.
Yeah. Like, well, we were talking about the taboos of like, is it acceptable for a woman in business to have their lips done, have Botox, have their boobs done?
Yeah.
Like, and it's stuff that like, it's all a personal journey. It's whatever makes you happy. So it's like, why are they even being brought up?
Oh, totally.
In this business
men
sphere.
do it too. Like, sorry, but like men get Botox all the time.
I know.
And I'm like, sorry, but like nobody is being like, oh my God, like he got Botox. Yeah. Like,
I'm not using this
how
guy.
dare he?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think it kind of loops back to the not taking seriously thing, but really like your looks and like how you feel about yourself shouldn't matter to anyone else. And if you want to enhance yourself, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. You get like the looks as a real estate agent or a woman in business. If you got your lips done, you got your boobs done, it's like, oh,
must be nice. You're making a bunch of money. Like, that's what people think, I think.
Yeah,
which is
true.
crazy too, because it's like, and that's where I was going back to like, maybe sometimes it is like a little bit of success. Cause like, it's not cheap to do those things.
Right.
But I mean, I know people that, don't have a lot and they're still getting Botox. They're doing whatever.
Exactly.
So I just like, I think, it's crazy to me that people judge still like in our new age and society and just like, we're so progressive now. And I'm like, why is this even still a topic of conversation that people are still knocking it? You know what I mean? It's crazy to me.
I know. And it's interesting because now women are like, it's normal to see women in these business roles and being successful. And it's also normal to see these women enhancing themselves. And you see all these people on TV. And
people are in the public and whatever. And like, honestly, in my opinion, like whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Same.
Like, who am I to tell somebody like what they should and shouldn't do with their like body, with their face, with their looks?
Same.
Like, I'm not going to like go and tell somebody how to do their hair.
I know.
So like, who am I to go and tell somebody like that they shouldn't, and I feel like people too, specifically with women, like the looks and stuff is always like a topic of conversation. It was 20 years ago. It was 40 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
And like, no matter how progressive or how, how far we come, it's just like it still hasn't like phased out.
It's that little underlying like,
yeah. And I guess like men in
serious.
some ways could argue that like, you know, maybe they have more of a pressure to like drive a nicer car if they have like, which like, you know, you could kind of argue it that way too.
Sure.
But I'm like, also females have that too.
Yeah.
Like we also have to drive a nicer car, and we, you know what I mean? Like we feel those pressures too all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Know. Well, and that's the thing. So like taking example, like Kim K. Okay. So we were just talking about this.
Yeah.
Like what is the successful businesswoman look like? Who is she? What traits does she have? And Kim Kardashian came up in conversation, and like, man, she's had work done. She does not look like your typical.
She had a sex date.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm like, no one even cares about that anymore.
I know.
Like,
and she's killing it.
It's crazy. Like, it's like you can, you know, and she's, I think, in my opinion, like she's overcome that.
Yeah.
And being like that was like a super public.
Right.
And, you know, people still bring that up with her. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, she's only famous because she has sex tape. And I'm like, okay, well,
she also runs all to be successful.
Yeah. And I'm like, if anything, and I saw once, like, because I'm, of course, like, I watch the Kardashians.
Yeah.
I saw her argue once, which I completely agree with. If anything, that made it even harder for her to get into business.
Yeah, exactly.
She had to overcome that. Like, I haven't had to overcome, like, a big public, scandal.
True.
You know what I mean? Like, she had to overcome that. And people still like talk about, and I'm like, I feel bad for her in that sense, because I'm like, you've done so much for yourself.
I know.
And still people want to tear you down about that. It's ridiculous.
I know. And so her image, like outwardly and probably more specifically to men, are like, oh, Kim K, reality star, sex tape chick. But really, like, she's literally like killing the business game. She has so many multifaceted businesses.
Yeah, Skims is killing it.
Like unreal. And she's involved in every process. And like not a lot of people know. And like she's behind the scenes and she's involved in all of the decision making. Like she is a great businesswoman.
Yeah.
And we'll lead it to who you think is an even better businesswoman is her mother.
Yeah, oh yeah. I love Kris Jenner. Like, I always see the memes of like Kris Jenner where it's like if you think you work hard, like Kris Jenner works harder or something. It's always like a picture of her in a martini. And I like love her though. I think she's like, and she's just like, if you've ever listened to her like speak about like her family, her kids, whatever, like her values and stuff are like, you know, and obviously like she's created through this reality TV show like
thousands of business
and
opportunities.
Not only, and like all of her kids now have their own stuff. Like even like people are like, oh well, Kylie, you know, she's the youngest. Well, she was like a billionaire at one point. Yeah. Even Kendall Jenner, like now she has like her own gin. Like I'm like, she has curated this like whole thing around her, and she just like still walks around like, oh, I love my kids. Like, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, I just think she's a really cool person.
I think
I'm like, if I could meet somebody, I think that's who it would be. Not even joking.
I think she's smart. I think she capitalizes when she can. And she knows how to work, you know, certain marketing campaigns and she knows what sells and she's doing a damn good job at it.
Yeah, I like her.
So do I. Okay.
She kicks ass.
Yeah. So now the controversial Taylor Swift economy that I was talking to you about.
There's so much talk about it. It's crazy.
Okay. So real talk, I didn't love her. Like I listened to a few of her songs. My little girls like dance around to her music. Yeah. Fine.
I have younger sisters and my one sister's like obsessed with her.
Really?
And it's crazy to me that like she was big when I was in school. And like, I have a 10-year age gap with my sister and she's like, now Taylor Swift is like the biggest thing of her generation. I was like, it was like the biggest thing of mine though. Like it's kind of weird. Yeah. And like I'll like give her the credit for that for sure. I have not always been like a big fan of her just because like the stuff that I've seen of her personality, I haven't like loved. And I mean, there's nothing bad about it. Like, I'm not going to go and say she hasn't done anything wrong or whatever. It's just like, I haven't connected with her in that.
Right.
So I think that's where I'm like, And her music to me, like, I definitely like some of her newer stuff and some of her older stuff too when I was younger, but I have never gotten to be like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. Yeah.
No, and neither had I. And like the songs that I listen to with my little girls, they're fun, they're poppy, super easy to listen to. But like, only through the last few months of her blowing up with Travis Kelce and like this Eras tour and learning more, and like I've kind of dived into a little bit of like what she does, and now I actually like her more. Like she gave away money
Like $100,000 to each of her like semi-drivers or something.
I love that idea.
Love that, yeah.
And you know, she's so nice with like kid fans, and so I actually appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate her a lot more now that I've kind of dived into what she does. But the Swift economy that they are talking about now is
what are they calling it? Didn't
insane.
you have a name for it?
Swiftonomics or something.
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it literally said that if Taylor Swift was an economy, she would be richer than 50 countries.
Yeah.
Like that is what? Like this Eras
crazy.
Tour that she's on will make $1 billion this coming March, and that's not even the end of the tour.
Yeah.
Like she's capitalized. What was it, in Arizona?
She's done like the craziest stuff for her business too, though.
Yeah.
Like I read something on her once where like she releases like an album on like the exact date
smart.
on like the exact, and like she drops hints on like her Instagram, and then like her fans, there's a bunch of like conspiracy theories around it, and like so she's creating not only clever. Just like that, but like she's also creating this whole like media and stuff behind that part of her life too.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's like, I don't know if it's her marketing team, but
whoever
she's paying.
Yeah, and I've also learned like she writes her own songs. She is a songwriter. She leaves little like Easter eggs, whatever, through her songs and her albums. I think that's super smart. I actually respect her more for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if she's behind it all, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. And
what I've heard of her, she's a pretty good
nice person.
Yeah.
But business wise, like I look at her, and if my kids grow up idolizing her as a pop star, but also like for behind the scenes of all of the stuff that she's doing for charity, all of the stuff she's doing for business and her own business, I'll be very happy that my kids are looking up to someone like that.
Yeah.
And, you know.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. And she, like, again, I think, you know, maybe the general public looks at her like, she's just a pop star, or she's like a teeny bopper pop star. But no, like go a little bit deeper and dive into all of the business that she's doing and that she's creating for the US, that she's creating for all of these places that she visits. Yeah. She has had an economy spike in these states.
I know. And like, you can't even like, you know, because I used to be like, I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. And I'm like, I literally, you can't even like
deny.
You can't deny it anymore. And like, you can't even, if I were to be like, I don't like her. Like, there's so many arguments that people can make again. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't even argue why I don't like her anymore either. Because I'm like, she's a good person. She's doing all these things for other people. Like, I'm like, it's crazy. You can't even say that you don't like her anymore.
I know. And I don't anymore. And like, not that I never didn't like her, but I truly look at what she's doing and what she's building and what she's creating and how she's doing it. I think she's doing it classy.
Yeah.
I think she's not showboaty.
Yeah.
And
how many like of those teens and pop stars went through like all these like drug scandals and like whatever, and she really didn't go through that phase.
I agree.
So yeah, good for her.
As a businesswoman, I think she's very smart, and whether it's a team behind her or not, and if she's making the big decisions, I think she's doing a fantastic job at showing young girls what you can do, how to do it the right way.
Yeah. And her songs are based around that too.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah. So no, I quite like her, and really like my top two that I would look at as not your typical businesswoman are creating like $1 billion industries. So I really
so you don't always have to fit the norm, I think, at the end of the day, right?
And I think it's changing.
Okay. Also not on the norm, but I watched 60 Minutes last week.
Okay.
I'm like so old. No, but I saw on there that like Pink is like selling out, I forget the number, but it was like a stupid amount of tickets, and like the amount of like arenas that she's selling out on. Like she's making like a lot of money right now, and she's like killing it, and nobody's talking about her. And that's what they were talking about on 60 Minutes. It's like all this stuff is going around on like Taylor Swift and
really?
Like how she's doing all this stuff, and I'm like, Pink has been like doing like selling out tours, doing all this stuff, and like
not getting the recognition. Interesting.
Well, it's not even that she's not getting recognition. Like she's making money, she's doing all this stuff. Yeah. She doesn't care about it though, and that's I think too like kind of cool, because she's just kind of like, I don't really care about how much I'm in the media and stuff. Like And one comment that she made, she's like, honestly, like the biggest thing for me is like that I have people coming to my concert and like, no matter who you are, you feel comfortable.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, whether you're like, you know, a bunch of 14-year-old girls coming or you're like a dad taking your daughter and the dad's having a good time. Like, she's like, that's how, you know,
I think she's super down to earth.
Or 35-year-olds. Yeah. But anyway, I was like, oh, wow. Because it was just interesting because I'm like, Taylor Swift is everywhere in the media right now. She's literally almost like taken over everything. It's crazy. I think too, like when we were talking about who is like the businesswoman, we never said, which I'm like going back now, we never said, oh, somebody that has to be a professional or somebody. And we were just like somebody who's driven, who wants to do their thing. And I think authenticity is like the biggest thing right now too, because people want something different too. And whether you're in a role where like you're I guess managing people or you just run like a solo business or whatever, like so much stuff is around like personal branding too. Like Kim Kardashian or the Kardashians are a good example of that. Yeah. But even like, you know, if you're a CEO running like a bunch of employees and stuff too, like being your authentic self, I think resonates with like employees so much too. Yeah. And that's why women who are doing it and, you know, like you have happier staff when you are not like trying to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah. I think it all comes back to having that vision, making sure that you're sticking to your guns in what you believe and staying true to yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Love that. What a great note to end on.
I know, totally. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I think that's it. So, we do have an event coming up, speaking of sticking to your guns and envisioning. Yeah. We've got a goal setting and business planning event coming in December. So please make sure you're following along or sign up for our newsletter so that you can keep in touch and get some more info on that.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing too. Like the business planning is going to be huge.
I'm
like
super excited about it.
Stuff too. I think we all like looking forward to the new year. I think it's going to be really cool to like get together with a bunch of people who are all trying to have the same goals.
Me too. So yeah, follow us on Instagram, She's Homemade, and see you next time. We redo that.
No, let's just keep going.
Fine.
Well, he'll cut it.
Okay.
That one was shorter, but I think
was it?
I think so.
No. It was longer?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even